Okay, today is September 1st, it's Labor Day 2014, and we just had the in Pittsburgh, we had the North American Championships over the weekend. We also had the first Pro Masters Championships. So to get some commentary, we have last year's North American over 40 Super Heavyweight Champion, Matt Puglia. Matt, let's get some comments on you, starting with the Pro Show. I know you've been up against a few of these guys before, so what were your thoughts on the Masters Pro Show?
Yeah, the over 40 was kind of the hallmark show there, and I think that when you look at it, they didn't get the numbers I don't think that they wanted yet, but it was a good start, and the guys that won it were true Masters competitors. You had Brad Davis in first, and he was last year's North American's overall in the over 40, so I lost to him in the overall.
Yep.
And he's just a thick, big guy. And in second, you had Rob Yules, who just turned pro at the Team Universe. And he was kind of the opposite of Brad, where he was diced, probably in way better condition, probably the best condition of the show. But then, you got to make that decision. You want big or do you want condition? And they went this time with the size on that one. And then third was a guy, Robert Belisle. I think he's from Canada. And he comes in shredded, but he's a smaller guy, so he kind of lagged behind the other two. There were a couple other big names in that show. Sean Allen did it.
Yeah.
But he was kind of a little off the mark conditioning-wise as far as those top guys, and finished down in the pack someplace. The over 50, the only one that really stuck out was Rusty Jeffers, who still looks probably better now than he did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's actually crazy. And I was reading somewhere they were talking about it would have been interesting to actually have a Masters overall, because he probably would have lined up good with those other guys that we just talked about.
Okay. Now we move on to the Masters Amateur, which was a pro qualifier, which you were in last year, would have been in this year possibly. What did you think of that show, that division this time?
I thought they were solid. Both the Masters classes, relative to other Masters shows, were down a little bit in size and numbers. Light heavies had good numbers, but if you look, they all were down a little bit. When you looked at the Masters Nationals, every class had like 25 in it, so it was off a little bit, maybe just because of the timing of the show. I just kind of watched the light heavies, and supers, and the guy that won the supers in both the over 35 and over 40 had competed previously at the Masters, and I thought he looked great. He has a very aesthetic look, very kind of small-waisted, big guy, big frame. And I think, down the road he'll be real good. He didn't get his pro card at this, because they only give out pro cards for the overalls in those two divisions. And the two overalls was the light heavyweight, I believe, in the 35 and over, and the heavyweight in the 40 and over. And both of those guys were just, typical Masters guys, where they're just dense, striated to all hell, and tons of muscle. The light heavyweight guy was a guy from Connecticut, actually, so he was kind of a local guy from around here, but he looked great. And that was kind of the Masters wrap-up.
Okay, and we move on to the Men's Open.
The Men's Open was a pretty good show, actually. I thought relative to some of the other shows earlier in the year, maybe, that we saw a lot of conditioning. This was a conditioning show, and I think it really stood out. The overall winner, Eric Ramirez there, was just crazy.
It's about the best condition I think a human being could get into, wouldn't you agree?
It's the best I've seen in a long time. It makes you think back to those guys like Hamdullah, the guy from Turkey, and there's a few others that used to show up like that too. But I mean, it was just crazy. And I think when you look at that class and what had happened, you had Matt Porter finish in second. And I think what happens is when you get a guy like Eric Ramirez that shows up in that kind of condition, it makes guys that are a little bit off look way off. So it becomes, the highly conditioned guys kind of move up in the pack, I think. So I think that's why you see a guy like Benny Brantley, who's got structure for days and days and days, and going to win one of these sooner or later. I think he was fourth, maybe third, fourth, somewhere in that range. The light heavyweight was good. I've read a lot about some of the talk that he might be a 212 guy down the road, because he's young, super young. He's like 23 years old.
Tristan Escolastico.
Yeah, and he was packed. There was nothing missing there. And if he was 197 at that show and he's got 15 pounds to deal with, he could be a real problem, down the road, especially being 23 years old. Then of course the super heavies, you had Dusty winning, which was great to see. I think he brought in probably his best combination. You know, Dusty's been fighting for a couple of years where he's either super conditioned and maybe too stringy, or he's too full and maybe lacks a little bit of the condition, and I think he kind of hit one out of the park here. You know, there were some other big names in that super heavy class, but he did it. And I think he ended up with one of the pro cards. Those were the 3 guys who got the pro card too. But I think when you talk about Dusty, I think he's one of those guys that's just good for the sport. He's one of those guys that, you know, does a lot of the social media and really works his butt off. And you can't find anybody that's ever said anything bad about him. And I think you just need more guys like that at the pro level. So overall, you know, it was kind of a packed show. Now, where they go from here with those guys, I'm not really sure. You know, I think a lot of these guys are going to have to take a little bit of time off and really kind of restructure things to do anything with the pro ranks right now. But you know, that's what's happening at these shows these days. So it's not like back in the day in the 90s where a lot of these guys could jump right from the amateurs to the pros. It's really a big difference nowadays. So we'll see where it shakes out in a year or two.
All right, Matt. Appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Thanks.